today we're going to be giving opportunity, 3 people, to just talk about what it's meant for them and how this series is landing in their lives. And I think it's good for all of us to hear. So it needs to build faith, and it needs to be an opportunity for us to celebrate what God's doing. And it's a great joy. This guy is such a blessing to me. And he's one of the most generous people I know. So we're going to keep a little bit of distance here. Protocol, because we're present. And I'm going to just ask a few questions by way of leading the conversation, and we'll give Luther an opportunity to talk us through some of these things. So, Luther, tell us, what truth from this series stood out for you the most?
I would say the priority of money. One of the sessions that you talked about was basically came down to who gets the priority of your bucks. And for me, I think there's something big that shifted towards my family, who would generally take priority over my budget and my own needs, towards actually it's his. So I would say that was the bigger shift. How I think and feel and use my money, that has changed, because it's not really mine anymore.
Yeah.
That's a big penny that dropped.
See what he did there? The penny dropped.
The penny dropped.
Good.
It was a big penny.
So as you kind of took that truth in and just kind of realizing we get to prioritize God, it's actually a way that he dignifies us. Like we're not forced to do it. Nowhere in Scripture is it like, thou shalt. That's old law. But tithing and actually bringing our first fruit is biblical. It's there before the law came. It's there after the law. It's our way of actually saying, I'm going to put you first, and bringing the authority of God over our finances. But when that truth came, was it something that you felt challenged by, convicted by, inspired by, all 3? What was the kind of processes as you listened to it on the day, as you kind of walked away, gave it thought? What was kind of like the inner workings that you felt God was busy doing?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of all of that.
Yeah.
What I've particularly enjoyed about this series is it's something that we could discuss with our kids. So we would, around the table, talk about what do you think about it. And it was interesting, different kids having different responses. But it was definitely a family shift for all of us, where before we knew we had to do these principles like tithing and giving and saving. But there was just a different spin on it, almost like an invitation where God says, if you prioritize me, where it's really, really the first thing you do, then I'll take care of all those other things. Because living expenses has always been the thing that I would worry mostly about.
Yeah.
Because you've got to provide, right? You've got to make sure that the budget balances and there's enough. But I felt like there was an invitation, almost like let's go over to the wild side. Why don't you put me first? And we've started doing that as a family. So whenever that wonderful one time, or that message would come in that money was coming in, we had a response was like, great, let's give. And we would involve our family around it. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
And it's been a beautiful thing to see, just like through conversations with everyone, that moment where money comes into our lives. There's income. And it's not limited to salary, just also that we know that. Any form of increase, there's something of a putting God first. And I mean, one of the things that we spoke about was just there can be a level of excitement, and I think there should be a level of excitement, kind of say, hey, here's an opportunity for us to do it. And the order of it, it's like the first thing we do, and to not allow time, because that money can come in and, take a week to do it, starts to lose something, because now you're actually consuming something of it. So that prioritizing God and saying, I'm going to put you first, and I'm going to put you first with all of my increase, and realize that you can do way more with the 90% than I could ever do with 100%. Is one realization, and then the other realization is by prioritizing Him and by actually bringing His order into our finances, it carries His spirit, not a spirit of mammon, which is just freeing, right? So do you feel like it's been a freeing thing?
Yes. So the first series you did talked about Matthew 6, and it talks about our treasures. And somewhere in there it says that you cannot serve both money and God. And I always knew this, but I didn't think it applies to me, because somehow I thought I can do both, kind of, I can manage my finances, and it's a balancing thing, right? But what's really shifted for me is it has become the utmost priority for me that when money comes in, and surprisingly, it is become one of the most exciting things to action and authorize on the banking app, because I realize that by putting God as a priority, the other stuff will happen, but it's always kind of been the other way around.
Yeah.
And I realize that our treasure is really where our heart is, right? So the thing that we pay for first, and when you look at our budget, it's the thing that consumes you. It's what you think about mostly. So for me, my budget used to be black and white. It's now colorful. It's like, great, we're going to tithe, we're going to give, and let's see what God's going to do with the rest.
Yeah.
Where before, to my shame, it was like, how am I going to balance this? Okay, I know I need to get to tithing because it's what I'm supposed to do. And then sometimes it happens later in the month. And for me, I would say that's been the biggest shift. And I feel my heart has shifted to what God is busy with. And it's just a lot more exciting.
Yeah. So, of all the years that you've tithed, looking back, could you say there's ever been a moment where you've regretted it or felt like you've been worse off because of it?
No, never. It has been hard at times. It's never like it just gets easier, especially when more money comes in. It's funny how that works. Yeah. But no, I've never regretted it. I think what I have regretted is that I've tithed on net and not gross. And by doing that, I feel like there's more of an adventure, and there's more of a like, okay, let's see how God's going to do this, because my budget says this is not going to work.
Yeah. And what would you say as far as your walk with God, just relationally, what has that shift meant for your relationship with Him?
Sure. It's definitely gone to a deeper level, because it's actually, funny enough, it's less calculated. There's more of a trust that I'm having with Him when it comes to our finances. And in some ways it's more scary, but isn't that kind of like, if you approach God, it's in some ways more dangerous but more freeing?
Yeah.
And there's literally an exchange that's happened. I feel like I'm surrendering more what I thought I had to have control over. And so it's been sweet, it's been real, and it's been extremely liberating. That's a surprising result that it's been. That it's not so much how am I going to get out this month, but what's His money going to get up to this month? And I would say it's definitely deepened my walk with Him.
Yeah.
I don't worry so much about money anymore. I'm actually more expectant about how things are going to happen.
It's beautiful. I think that was one of the things at the outset of this series, was to say, if we can come into greater freedom, then we've actually mined the Word of God and allowed Him to speak into our lives in such a way that it was actually a really meaningful couple of weeks. Because to have freedom in this area is so huge. And it's the one area that I think people lack freedom. The closed, kind of fisted reality to it. It means that spiritually I'm free, I'm saved, and my soul's going to heaven, I'll be with God. But we live this life with that level of tension. And so to actually hear someone speak about greater liberty by just actually bringing something of God's order, because that's what's actually taking place here. It's like His order brings peace and freedom, and it's great to hear. So I have absolutely loved my conversations with Jess through the course of these, actually, just always, because she's like a sponge, man. She just takes things and really allows God to do a work in her heart, and so it's been great to hear, like these last few weeks, just something of God's workings, and to be in a place where you can be vulnerable and honest is such a beautiful thing. That's why God says, it's in weakness that I'll show myself, Because it's when we think, we've got everything together and, we're on top of it, then, it doesn't work like that, eh? And so God allows these beautiful seasons in our lives to just undo some things and then strengthen us from the inside, and the heart gets built with courage. So you've inspired me, and you've really been like a deposit of courage. And I'm sure others will agree. It's just in the interactions that we've had. So it's great to have you join us, and I'm going to start off by asking you the same question. What truth out of this series has kind of been most highlighted, if it's just one or
it's been
more
challenging to actually try and wrap my mind around everything, because there have been so many things that have stood out. But I really had to be real with myself and real with God, and I think it's the generosity of believers. And I think God it hasn't been like an easy time, and God has really brought me to my knees, and He just says to me, He's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And understanding, I think its generosity is so different when we understand God's love for us, and like the greatest sacrifice, and that we get to partner with Christ, not from a place, not for reason, but from reason, like you said. And I think that's been the biggest shift for me, of actually God, who created this world, gets to partner, He wants to partner with and through me. And that's and one of the things that you said was that when God can use money through us, He'll give us almost to have that open channel. And it's been a challenging time of really just bringing to my knees and actually realizing, wow, God sees me as worthy, and that His love is radical, and that we get to partner and be His hands and feet. So that's been huge for me.
Yeah. Awesome. If we think of when God created, His intent was for us to rule and to have dominion, to multiply. There was very definite things that He had in mind as far as His original intent in His creation. So when He comes and saves, and He brings redemption to our lives, He's actually putting us back into that course where we actually get to have some level of authority and ruling over, and there's a dominion, there's a multiplying, but it's according to His economy, His way of doing things. To actually have the privilege to partner with Him. We don't just have fellowship with God. Jesus has won that. We have fellowship with Him. We're in a relationship with the Father. But to know that it's fellowship and partnership.
Yeah.
Because God's at work, right? He's drawing people to himself. He's doing amazing things. And some of those moments requires finances. Not always just moments of obedience or time or saying the right thing. It's like there's need, and so partnership is great, and to be able to do it with God is incredible. So do you feel like you were challenged, convicted, inspired, all three?
Yeah. I definitely have been challenged to just live more simply and to reshift my priorities completely, because we get to experience God's power in and through us. And a big thing that stood out for me was intentionality. Like, one little example, I went to the shops, I was looking for something, we had to like dress up or whatever, so I didn't want to spend a lot on it because I wasn't going to wear it again. And I went to the shop, and then this girl comes to me and she's like, what? Like, I could see like she was struggling, and she had a little kid with her, and like things were not easy, and she's like, which dress I think suits her better? And I was like, oh, that was so sweet. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this. And we like held it up and we really discussed. And I was like, why don't you go try it on and see what fits better? And then like we had like a little moment, and then I left. And then I got home, and I was teary, because I was like, I could have just bought her both of those dresses, and I wasn't intentional in that moment. I wasn't spirit-led, and I wasn't aware actually that that is an opportunity to be actually loved. And from that moment, has challenged me intentionally to like, when I go to the shop, like sit and be like, okay, Holy Spirit, like I'm in this endeavor. If there's an opportunity where I can pay for groceries or buy not just one of that girl's dresses, but two, like she was a mom and had a baby, and you could see she was on her own, and I was just like, wow, we get to partner with Christ. And that really like strung deep within me. And also when it comes to like my work and my career, is actually that thing of like, I'm not working, like I've got this little sign on my computer that's like, you're working for the Lord and not for man, just because like that's been my heart, and God has challenged me. Actually, I'm working to worship God and to partner with Him, not for like earthly gain and earthly comforts, but for something bigger.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what does that shift then look like practically to be intentional? Has that been like, let's go back to the budget, let's see how we can actually reorder things in terms of the 4 jars,
Yes.
Has that been something that you and Alex have sat with and discussed and put in place?
Yeah, it has, and I actually was shocked. Well, not shocked, but I was like, one day Alex came home and he laid it out all organized and structured, and he's like...
Alex, organized.
Alex, thank the Lord for Alex and his wisdom and his structure. It helps me so much. And he's like, this is the way forward. And I was like, you're kidding. And that was like, I was like... wow, like we're gonna have to cut back. But then, first thing was like, because then we were like we used that jars. It was so helpful for us actually just to restructure and to prioritize the promises, the tithing and the giving. That's God's promises, or like He comes through. And it really challenged me. But then I remembered the thing of like, actually, what a joy to be able to partner with Christ. And like, I'd rather have to limit myself in the shoe department. No, but it's not even about that. It's just to know that and it takes intentionality. That's been a challenge.
So I think one of the things that we can have a great expectation for is when we make those shifts, like you're doing an adjustment to kind of say, well, I want to make room for these things. I want to not just focus on principles that the Bible gives, which is more around like the living expenses and that we should save but not save everything. But there's actually promises of God that I get to walk in. and the tithing and the giving is like where there's ministry involved, there's helping, there's kingdom advancing realities. But when you do that, you're taking from the living and the saving, like you're reordering things. The testimonies that will come down the line is where people will, over a period of time, be able to look back and say, we've either not missed it, like the money that's gone to tithing and giving, we've never ever missed it. I asked the question of Luther, and it's my testimony as well. There's never ever been a tithe or any giving that I've ever felt, oh boy, why did we do that? Yeah. We're worse off for it. Like God has actually been so faithful. But how he can turn whatever's left, where there's living expenses and saving, like that's where the glory lies, because we can't do it in our own strength, but he can.
Absolutely.
And he does it in a way that just astounds us.
Yeah.
So that thing of like sowing in squares and reaping in circles and leaving the corners for giving, for generosity, I mean, he just makes the field bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. It's how it works. Yeah. It's how his economy works. And so we get to, with anticipation, and I'm not saying that as a formula, it's an expression of faith. So there's, God's not bound by any formulas. It's not like, if we do this, then, but I do know that he is faithful and he's true to his word. And when he says, test me in this, he's serious about that. And he'll keep us from realizing or thinking that it's a formula. So it won't be like, I did this and then that worked. But he will allow things to work in such a way that faith will be the primary thing. Yeah. And we'll be astounded by how he brings increase.
Absolutely.
And beautiful generosity and tithing would be the way that we actually walk in that promise of God.
Absolutely.
So what does it mean for you just in your personal walk with God, just relationally? What do you think that shift and those changes has actually done?
I think it's definitely increased my dependency on God, and just the realization that, like to get into his word, and if I am like this, I can be like this. Yeah. It's really just challenged me that what I count is lost for actually the sake of knowing him, because of his greater sacrifice. And actually I need to depend on Christ, because if I want to partner with him, I need to, which I do, and like what an honor and joy that just increases my dependency and just daily communion with Christ, to be able to be spirit-led and hear his voice and stop for the one like Jesus modeled so beautifully.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't have it all right, but this is just what I've really been challenged in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
When I was reflecting over this, actually over the past couple of weeks, and especially just yesterday, one of the things I realized that it wasn't necessarily just God's truth that stood out for me, but was the difference in God's truth and the reality of my own life that really touched home for me. And I think it all came together in the sermon. We call it, you call it the brevity of life, but was with the different buckets and the different situations we find ourselves in. And I actually found, in each one of those situations, I could see a bit of myself in each one of those situations. Yeah. And God almost put his finger on it, like in each one of those situations. And just the concept, and you touched on it earlier with Jess, but there's promises and there's principles. The promises of tithing and giving generally, and the principles of living and saving generally. I think that really tied together kind of a bit of a war inside my own heart. Generally, I would feel, like if I read the Bible, it wasn't something someone said specifically, it's just the way I picked it up that, money is all about promises. We've got to live radically and give everything away and tithe and do all that. And yet, and the other side of the equation is my personality, which is very analytical, and I always hear about compound interest and saving, and I always think principles. I think we've got to live, and that war inside me has always resulted that I always want to save everything, and at the same time, I see the need and I want to love on people, but I don't have the ability to let go of my finances and give. And I think that principles shifted for me when I could see that we could live in a healthy way in both, with God's kingdom and His order, living both principles and promises. And I think that was beautiful for me. Yeah.
So how have you and Lizette worked that out? That warring, the wrestle, because I mean it obviously flows into conversation, and like, so what are we doing here? What's God speaking to us about? What are the kind of changes and transforming that He wants to do? What does that look like?
You're so right. It's been a conversation, and it's been us both. I think the war has just
She
been...
told me about it.
Yeah. The war has just been in my own heart, so Lizette's just praying for me the whole time. You guys can all pray for Lizette. She's got me to deal with. But it's been an amazing conversation over the last couple of weeks, and it's like God has worked in both our hearts and our lives, and I think, you know, like God's really challenged me on what you shared with our money is such a reflection of faith, hope, and love. And God's really pinpointed, you know, faith and hope to me. It's felt like I've wanted to love people by seeing need and always experiencing, like you say, the joy of giving. But it's felt like I haven't been able to express that love because I've put my faith in my own ability to produce money. And my hope in kind of having money as a security for later, that I'm not willing to trust God, that He's my provider fully. So I think, that's been a shift in my life.
And so the actual application of things, what is that? Is that a work in progress? So you guys kind of making sense of that? What does it look like practically? So like the inward you've spoken about, but outward, how does that land?
Well, it was really deep. We opened up our computer and we opened up Excel, Microsoft Excel, and it's those things with all those blocks for those that don't know. And my wife and I, being engineers, we actually quite enjoyed it. So, no kidding, we had date night, no kidding, and we actually lit a candle while we were doing budgeting. I know it's weird, but that's the way we did it.
And that's how you save money as well.
Yeah. And we just practically took, I mean, I don't think you were trying to be prescriptive, you know, with the 10, 10, 10, 70. But I think it was amazing just putting a number to it, because I think sometimes we can speak about, you know, we need to give more and we need to save more and live a little less. And sometimes, you know, how does that actually find traction? So it was useful just looking at our budget. And to be quite honest, to see, our saving is in excess of 10 times our giving. Maybe it's a problem, you know. And one of the things that we practically did is to help our desire to give more. We actually set up a portion of our budget for giving, and
awesome.
And what we did is we actually gave a portion, you know, like for myself and a portion for Lizette, because we also felt like we want to be spirit-led in the moment, and we didn't want to kind of do the honoring thing and, you know, like, hey Lizette, like I feel I want to give, and the other person, you know, goes out the shop. You know, we wanted to feel like in the moment we could give, and so we kind of set up a little portion, and I think we're also trusting God to be able to increase that more and more over the years. So
very cool. And just relationally, as far as your walk with God, what do you think has kind of come over that?
And this was actually, you know, a question in the WhatsApp questionnaire, just for some feedback. And I almost thought like God has done amazing stuff, but I also felt in another sense that it's almost, I want to use the word premature, but just understand what I'm saying is I feel like I want to be asked the question again in 10 years, because I feel it's like this is like a pivotal moment in my life, and it will reflect over the next 10 years. It won't just be a thing for tomorrow, this week, this year. I really believe it's gonna bring a change. But I think in the immediate sense, there's just been an excitement. And as Jess said, to partner with God, like we're really excited, and I'm so excited just to use my money for God's kingdom, and not just giving, but through all of those areas. And I think perhaps it's also worth saying that, like, and you've preached on this before, but it's like it's our Father, and just having the conversations with different people, and how open people would be to radically change their lives. Although most of us are set in our rhythms and routines and practices of doing things, people are willing to radically change their lives in a very, you know, like fundamental, you know, like with money, which is a very sensitive topic. And just to be able to walk with people and have those conversations, it feels like it's not just my relationship with God that's shifted, but it's our relationship with God that's shifted. And I think that's brought an excitement in my life to be able to do that together with God. So it's been amazing. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love what everyone said, as far as the opportunity that this presents. It's a great invitation for us to work with God. It's a beautiful partnership experience that is soaked with His liberty. When we give Him the control and we don't have to take control anymore, it's so freeing. And to be a part of something, the temporal realities of this life, it means nothing. That's why Jesus said, don't find your life in the abundance of possessions. You can't do that. You will be missing it, completely missing it. But to actually start moving into a space where we bring order to our finances, that it releases something for us to be a part of what God is doing. What a joy. What a great, beautiful joy. I read an article of a doctor by the name of Emmanuel Taban. I don't really know if I'm pronouncing it right. There he is. So this guy is based in Joburg, and he is a pulmonologist. Lungs and respiratory. And through this COVID season, he's observed something of a non-responsiveness to ventilators. And it doesn't make any sense. Why would there not be a response, was his question. So he started doing scopes, bronchoscopes or something it's called. And he went in and he found that actually there's a buildup of, excuse the details of the story, but I need to tell you, a buildup of mucus, phlegm, that causes plugs in the airways. So it doesn't matter how much of the ventilation is going, if it's blocked, it's blocked. And with that scope, he would actually unplug it, remove it, and there would be massive recovery. And he has saved so many lives because of this. What a story. But there's a story behind the story, because he's from South Sudan. And he left South Sudan at the age of 14. War-stricken South Sudan. His dad was murdered. Family dispersed. Landed up in Kenya. There was a family member there. And then at the age of 16, he walked to South Africa. And then he became a gardener. And the family that he was doing garden work for took him under their wing, took him to church. It was a Catholic church. And there they decided, as a church, they were going to help him. So they brought the resource to give him an education. They helped him finish matric. And then he went and studied medicine at Medunsa. Went on to get 3 degrees. And now he's saving lives. I think it's ironic that his name's Emmanuel. Because there's something of a God with us in his life. But to be that church, to be that family, to know that we have an opportunity to come alongside people from South Sudan who, within the circumstance and what they've been given in life, can only amount to a gardener. Say, no, there's more that God has for you. There's something of his kingdom at play. There will be testimonies down the line of the lives that you will save because of your education that we are actually going to fund. You see, I want to be a part of the partnering work where there can be an ongoing God with us reality where lives get saved. I don't want to be a part of anything else. Because that's the only thing that has eternal meaning. And so bringing order into our finances is what allows us to actually partner with God and see these amazing stories of eternal significance playing out.